Well, hello everyone. I'm Christina, and I'm having an audience with Vivienne this evening, and we're going to actually be introducing her. She's a lovely Welsh lady, doesn't live too far from me, actually in Abergavenny, Vivienne Sharman Lewis. She's certainly looking good, and she's looking good and feeling fabulous as well. She's actually discovering her new health and wealth and wellness business and partnering with that. It's complementing her already extensive knowledge within the industry sector with health, wellness, and a myriad of wonderful other aspects that we're going to get into this evening. She's run a number of businesses, Vision PR, she has a spa business in Tenerife. She's run a fitness centre in Miskin Manor. She's organised an event recently with Abergavenny Art Society, which has been hosted on TV and Sky TV. Some incredible things that she's been up to. This lady has such a wealth of knowledge in this industry sector, but I think you're going to enjoy her story today because we're going to get into that a little bit about what she's been up to in recent years, as well as what she's done in the past, and how much that's sort of given her such a broad, wonderful thing. And she looks fabulous, as you can see, everybody. Always my lovely Vivienne. I've known Vivienne on and off for a number of years, and so it's a pleasure to be with her this evening. Okay, now a little bit about you, because it's lovely to meet you, Vivienne, and I'm looking forward to this lovely interview.
It's a pleasure to meet you too, Christina, and we do have quite a past thread of overlapping interests as well, and it's surprising how similar our backgrounds have been, how journeys have been.
Oh my gosh, yes. When we first came across one another, it was like, oh my gosh, because we came across each other on LinkedIn, and I was looking at it, I thought, oh my, I know this lady, I've seen here, I've seen her there, she's done this, she's done that, very similar things. Now, I know that the common interest thread, as you quite rightly said, through professional illustration, beauty and fashion, commercials, as well as film for TV. You've done a lot in terms of your passion, career, and your health and wellness industry, and a lot around those sorts of things, incredible things as well, with beautiful models, in terms of your, the commercial end of that. We'll get into that a little bit, we won't get too stuck on the point. So many, the marketing events and all sorts of things. So yes, we do indeed. So we've got a lot to talk about, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, tell me a little bit about your early career and how it led you into the world of, health and fitness and wellness. There's a lovely little backstory there, so I'd love to hear a little bit about it. It'd be a pleasure to hear that, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Christina. Yes, I was never a particularly sporty young lady at school, but I love to dance. I love to dance. And I did have an underlying health condition as a child. I suffered dreadfully with asthma and bronchitis. But it wasn't until I had the opportunity to leave home and to branch out on my own and head off to university. I did a year at Newport Art College, a fine art course, a pre-diploma. And then I went on to study graphic design, specialising in illustration at De Montfort University in Leicester. And it was during that time that I started to experiment more on my own health and physicality. And it corresponded with a time when health and fitness started to come more and more to the fore. And I don't know if you remember this, Christina, but the very first Holland and Barrett shops opened up all over the country. And I started investigating nutrition, health, wellness, yoga, and more really to overcome my own personal health conditions. I found that stress exacerbated the asthma, and it carried on well into my teens. When I was studying for my degree, I had a very bad bout of pneumonia, for example. And I remember asking my partner at the time, don't call the doctor. And the doctor was furious with him because he said, you realize this young lady could have died. Asthma is a serious condition. So I started to feel that I had a choice. It was a crossroads decision, one of those sliding doors moments when I thought, well, I either carry on as I am now and become more and more debilitated by this condition, or I take control of my life, my health, my body. I was never particularly overweight, but I did feel I didn't have enough tone, but I didn't understand what that meant then. It was only when I started studying exercise physiology that I realized it was my body fat percentage, my proportion of fat to lean muscle tissue was out. So I started off looking at diet, and I decided to try a vegetarian diet, which I found helped. It was a much lighter diet for my system. And I always remember the doctor saying when I was a child, whenever he was called to my bedside, it was a connection between the lungs and the digestive system. And he always advised my mother to keep me on a light diet, and she would give me steamed fish. And I would become well on that diet. But as soon as I was well, it was back to the sticky toffee puddings and the heavy clotted custards and the Sunday lunch with the roast. And I would find the same thing would happen again. So in those days, people didn't connect as much diet to health. They didn't correspond. So I started experimenting on myself. I started looking at health and food products. I remember buying every single ingredient on the cover of Here's Health magazine, the superfoods, kelp, brewer's yeast, blackstrap molasses, natural yogurt. I didn't know what to do with any of them, but I found out. And I started treating myself. And little by little, I found my health improve. I took up yoga, my flexibility improved. I took up jogging. I found my cardiovascular system started to improve. So by the time I moved to London, I was really on the cusp of wanting to know more, hungry to know more.
At that point, because London sounds interesting. So we've got somebody, like a lot of us, that found that they've got a health condition. I myself, I had a very similar journey. I totally understand that. I can only eat light foods. I'm far better on them. I eat a lot of fish and rice and vegetables. And if I eat anything heavier or I try to digress from that, I tend to get poorly too. So I think that's a very familiar story, and particularly with more sensitive women, perhaps a certain types. We talk about ectomorphs, endomorphs, and mesomorphs, and things like that. So I think that people's enlightenment has increased enormously, and I hear that in your understanding, which I think is lovely, because it's an evolution of understanding for people. I really like that. I like the fact that you've emphasized where you've moved from one point to another, and certainly over the, oh my gosh, the last 20 years, there's been a far better understanding, but it's taken its time. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit, but
well,
yes.
Food coloring as well, Christina.
Yes, let's talk about London. Let's talk about, I know you're working in London, and you were involved in that, and you had a time in your life you were there. So tell us a little bit about that and how that sort of evolved your story along a little bit more, please.
Yes, my creative life took me into professional illustration, and I was very fortunate to be given a brief to do a book for Ladybird. It was called Journey to the Centre of the Earth by Jules Verne. And the editorial director was very pleased with the work, and he actually recommended me to 3 London agents. So I took myself off to London with my art folder, and I had interviews with all 3. And I was taken on by Temple Art Agency in Chancery Lane. Patrick McGallagher and his father, they run the art agency. So I was fortunate to be taken on by an agent straight away, and they would then find me work. But of course, after a full social life at college, all of a sudden, I was the artist in the attic, if you like, squirreling away at my work in isolation as a freelance illustrator and missing that social buzz that I had at university. So it was a case of, nose to the grindstone, very sedentary work, very sitting down desk work, which didn't really help my health. I would take myself off to the park once a day and do a few laps of the lake. I was living at the time in Surrey, and very much seeing people race past my window every day on the way to London, and I felt I was missing out. So although I was doing very well, receiving work, I was doing jobs for Oxford University Press, McDonald's publications, all sorts of illustration, packaging design. I remember doing packaging for Fuller's Sweets for the airport market. And I even designed packaging for a wine, sirloin wine, for the Japanese market. So there was quite a variety of jobs, but I was missing the buzz. I was missing the buzz, the social buzz. So I saw a job advertised in a design magazine, and it said graphic architecture at its most broadest. And I didn't quite know what that meant. And the job was visualizer at Selfridges. design studio on Oxford Street. So I applied for it and I went along for my interview. And the senior display manager interviewed me, Colin Graves, who was quite a star in his field. And he loved my work. And he said he was looking for someone who could visualize in 3 dimensions. And when he saw my Journey to the Center of the Earth book with its geysers and volcanoes and underground caverns, he thought I was the right person who could see in 3D. So I got the job. So from being very, very sedentary, all of a sudden I was racing for the trains and racing for the underground and tearing across London, working on Oxford Street, one of the busiest places in the world, designing visuals for windows, exhibitions, designer collections. We had a summer exhibition, we had the Christmas grotto, we had the Christmas windows. So it was a very exciting place to work. I was working for Jim Henson from the Muppets, who came over from Hollywood, and we were doing the Muppets for Christmas Grotto. Then we did an exhibition on Star Wars. So I had Darth Vader to entertain. So it was a very exciting genre to be working in, but very fast, very fast. And I realized my health from being sedentary and desk-bound, all of a sudden I was in a studio, a very fast moving studio. So my health needed to improve even more.
I love it. Now, something you don't know about me, Vivienne, but I worked in David Morgan's and Howells, and I was doing the same, the visual artist work in the front window, and I used to love it. And that's where my art direction started in terms of how I started. So you don't know that. That's a lovely story. Oh my gosh. Now, you were in London. I do believe that you've started to get involved with dance and aerobics and things around the Pineapple Dance Studio. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. Well, Selfridges was very good. They had a very good staff program where they would invite teachers in. And I was fortunate enough to take part in a class run by Shivananda Yoga Centre, who were based at Notting Hill Gate in London. And I loved yoga, and I started attending classes at their centre. So much so that when the IRA was setting bombs off on Oxford Street and blowing out the windows at Selfridges, and the police were cordoning off all the underground, I was so desperate to get to my yoga class that I would hustle with the police officer. You must let me go. You must let me go on the underground. And I had to make that class for 6 p.m. every day. But I trained as a yoga teacher. I went off to New York. I went off to Canada, to their centers up in the hills, and I became a yoga teacher. But I was in the right place at the right time for health and fitness. My work had just gone into the TV Times. I designed all the visuals for the Christmas windows that year. And I had a lot of publicity in the TV Times and the Sunday Mirror. They reproduced my work there as publicity for the store. And at that time, the aerobics boom was taking off. So I was invited out to various things, and I got involved with the Pineapple Dance Studio. And I was able to try as many classes as my heart desired. And being a frustrated ballerina from a very little girl and loving disco music, what better way to exercise than to the beat of the disco? And rather than playing hockey or netball and getting soaked on the pitches, this was an opportunity to strut my stuff and wear the designer leotards and the tights and the headbands. And of course, Jane Fonda was the guru of the day. But even then, they didn't appreciate the physiology of fitness. They would go for the burn. They would do short range movements that would, well, strain the joints. They would do contraindicated toe touching exercises and spinal twists. So although the gurus were churning out these amazing videos, a lot of it was very dangerous. So they started to bring in courses to train people in how to teach exercise to music and aerobics. And I enrolled on the very first aerobic teacher training course that was ever run in the UK. And it was at St. Mary's Athletic College in Twickenham. And they didn't really know what to teach you because it was so new. So they taught us everything that they were teaching their sports science students. I was even doing muscle biopsies on taut young men's thighs to study the different muscle fiber types under microscopes. So it was a very intense course on exercise physiology, especially on fitness assessments and health screenings. We had Sebastian Coe's ex-coach taking us outside doing bunny hops, as even then they didn't understand contraindicated exercise. And we were leaping around the outside of a rugby pitch, leaping up in the air, hyper flexing the knee joints from a great height. Can you imagine the strain that put on the knees?
I can actually, yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up with pre-patellar bursitis at that time. So I was learning right at the tough side, really, of exercise physiology. But little and little, they were learning more and more about the safe ways to exercise, especially exercise in the public. So from there, I did the YMCA teacher training course, which was RSA validated, because they brought in validation then for courses. So courses had to be validated. So I had to do another course in order to get validated. And it really was like fame in those days, where you have to perform in front of a panel of instructors. And it was quite daunting to have to do that, to teach live classes and be assessed on them, as well as knowing all the theory. So from those courses, I started teaching myself in dance studios in the evening, and I was still doing my design work during the day. And then for personal reasons, I decided to relocate back to Wales.
I'm going to get there in a minute, because we're going to go there because you jump ahead of the story. Interestingly, I've spoken and worked with Seb Coe and a bunch of people myself when I was a speaker professionally, so they're wonderful people, and certainly Seb is a lovely person. But I find it interesting that you were, we were in London and going back and forth to London, and Nick and I, when the IRA were bombing, and we're actually on the streets the day that they blew up the Howells building. Quite interesting. And it didn't stop us either. So I find that quite amusing. But yeah, London's a beautiful place. And you've actually described quite a lot of places that I obviously know, but obviously you've described how that sort of evolution has actually happened for you, which is really lovely. And your memory for places is superb, by the way, Vivienne, I must say. I think a lot of people appreciate that, because if they're like myself, they're sort of recalling and recollecting these times. And, you know, as you said, Jane Fonda and people like that being a guru of these times, and starting to actually teach people the benefits of their body, their body temple, if you like, was a huge statement. So I'm thoroughly enjoying this. But yeah, let's talk about you, because you've done all these wonderful qualifications, and they're rather extraordinarily good. And as you said, you were in the right place at the right time, learning all these wonderful things. Now, you see, you come back to Wales. We're going to step to that point, because that's the next part of your story. Tell us a little bit more about how you came away from London and back to Wales. So yes, go there.
Yes, I was involved with someone that I'd met in university, and sadly the relationship came to an end, and I just felt I needed a change. And I found, even while living in London, I was drawn more and more to the coast. And for bank holidays, traveling back to Wales. And they say, beware of what you wish for, because it may come true. As a teenager, I yearned for the big city, the lights, the buzz. And little by little, I started to realize that my true nature was on the coast. It was in the countryside. So every weekend we would tear down to Hastings or Brighton just to escape the smog and the noise, because working on Oxford Street, it was just non-stop noise and buzz. And I think going more into yoga side as well, and meditation, I was yearning for those quiet moments. So it was an opportune moment to look at what was available for me back in Wales. Fitness was a little bit behind the times compared to London and the southeast in Wales. Unless you were a sort of 14-stone rugger player, there wasn't much hope of getting into any sports lecturing jobs or teaching jobs. So I started off teaching classes myself locally. And then I saw in the press that a local manor house, Miskin Manor Country House Hotel, beautiful 10th century manor house, just off the M4, was opening the very first bespoke private health club. The gentleman who owned Miskin Manor, Frederick Hood, had bought 3 similar manor house hotels, Brands Hatch House in Kent, another one in Yorkshire, and Miskin Manor. And he built 3 health clubs, and he called them after himself, Frederick's. So I went along for the opening day in my best designer tracksuit from London with the shoulder pads and look in the business with my little briefcase, and I introduced myself to the manager. And I think he was quite bemused by me. He didn't say a word. He just let me babble away, as I tend to do. And I told him I could teach 12 classes a week, different classes. I could cover all facets of physical fitness, motor fitness, cardiovascular fitness, muscular strength and endurance. I could do pre-ski workouts, post-ski workouts, power aerobics for men, yoga. And he just quietly looked at me and I said, I would love to set my business up here. And he said, okay. I think he couldn't say much else really. So I launched the Bodyline system and I took over the workout room at Frederick's, taught my 12 classes a week myself. I ran a small retail outlet selling very, very glamorous upmarket leisure wear, French leotards and swimwear. And I absolutely loved it. And I would liaise with the beautician, Caroline, and we would run health and beauty weekends. And I would have models parading around Frederick's in tennis wear. I would have the Reebok rep in to talk about healthy feet and how 3 times the body weight comes down with every impact. So I love the physiology of it all. I love knowing what was under the skin of fitness. So I was one of the very first people to buy computerized fitness testing equipment. I thought I wanted to get under the skin of fitness. I wanted to understand my clients and be able to design a program for them that suited their level of fitness and their health and physical conditions. So that went down very well. I had a very high-tech bike called a cat eye that would assess people's VO2 max, the maximum volume of oxygen their body was capable of taking in per kilogram of body weight per minute. And that was an excellent indicator of their cardiovascular fitness. So it was great that people could experience this. And then on the basis of that data, I was able to design them a fitness program. So it was great working in a very upmarket, luxurious leisure center, a health club really. But what I was finding was I was probably offering too much for the clientele who love to go off on cruises during the winter months, off on exotic holidays during the summer months. So the membership would decrease. And I was confined really to dealing with the members only. It was a members only club. So I decided I needed to get out a bit more and experience a bit more. The fitness industry was starting to blossom and InShape health studios had just opened up. So I went off again, got myself an interview, and I was taken on as the manager of InShape health studios in Cheltenham. And also they opened one in Oxford. So I spent quite a bit of time working there in a very, very fast turnover commercial gym, which was high street, right on the high street. So you're dealing with a different type of marketplace again. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. But what was happening in industry, people were expecting you to know more about the teaching side. And they started to bring in requirements where you had to have a professional teaching qualification. So I enrolled as a postgraduate degree in further education, which I did part-time over 2 years. And from there, that led me more into the teaching side because I was taken on by the college I was doing the course at to teach and lecture on their BTAC National Diploma in Public Services on the health and fitness module. I also taught on personal development, and I was able then to start designing my own courses: Fit for Life, How to Survive and Thrive from 9 to 5, Yoga and Philosophy. And I was teaching modules on various other courses, such as the Women Returners courses, teaching ladies assertiveness training, confidence building, interview skills, deportment, and also how to remain fit and well back in the workplace after being out of work for quite a while. And one of my students was very, very pleased with the course, and she mentioned it to a local reporter, and they asked if they could interview me about it. From that interview, there was a lovely big picture of me on my cat eye exercise bike. I was asked to go on BBC Radio Wales on the Frank Hennessy programme and talk about the course. And I remember Frank Hennessy, a Liverpudlian, he had a reputation for talking a blue line. And he had only allotted me about 5 minutes on his program. 15 minutes later, we were still chatting away and having a lot of fun, talking about how to maintain health and fitness in an office space. And even to the point where water in nylon carpets would keep the static electricity down, and how you could get a right old zap from your photocopying machine, and how it wasn't advisable to wear nylon underpants to work, which he was very amused about. So that went down well, but I actually let out the course number for the college, and the lines of the college were inundated with people wanting to do the course. So I started developing it as an online course then, because not everyone could get to the college, not everyone could do the course. But the college wasn't very pleased with me. They said, what if a parent had been trying to get through that day, Vivienne? The lines were in meltdown, nobody could get through. Marketing was early days. I don't the college appreciate it.
Because you're a pioneer and ahead of your time, which is quite interesting, because a number of elements you brought here, being in London, bringing that back to Wales, being, getting qualified and figuring out all of these different things and putting yourself in front of the Miskin Manor, he was the manager, wasn't he? And things like that. It's incredible. But you were ahead of your time learning this, adapting, teaching people how to be well. And we're talking now for many, many years that you've been underpinning the understanding of wellness and health and well-being. And as you said, underneath it, the beauty. I mean, obviously, my background's in wellness and fitness, but it's also in beauty. And I always used to say, well, beauty is, skin deep. There's a lot more to this. And, I think that shows in people's overall well-being. I mean, an awful lot of people have a lot of work done to them today in terms of, they have surgery and this, that, and the other. And there's no real need for that. They're looking after their bodies, which we know and we've obviously ascertained. But I really like the fact that you're an educator, that you've moved into the personal development side, which I've only touched on in my notes here, but I really, really like that, where you're giving women the confidence and assertiveness and the various other things. And we get asked for that today. I've coached many people in these particular fields of endeavor in terms of how they feel about themselves. We've started this whole thing about how we feel, about feeling good and you feeling fabulous. I love it. Okay, so let's underpin some of these wonderful things. Now, you kept on progressing in your career, if you like, in wellness and health and fitness. But you then came to this amazing aspect that I thought I don't know about it. It was the GP referral scheme, and I was fascinated because I had no idea that you were involved in that. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that, because that was quite fascinating even for me. I was like, oh, really? Yes. Tell us a little bit how you came into that field and what happened there in terms of the GP referral scheme and the story behind that.
Yes, I mean, what they say, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. And what I was finding at colleges as FE at the time, I was doing a lot of lecturing at that point. And as well as I was working with special needs groups, doing creative movement to music, for example. I was working with young people going to the Army, the Air Force, the Navy. And I was even teaching them aerobics. And I remember one young lad saying to me, gosh, Viv, if my mum could see me doing this, my life wouldn't be worth living, because he was doing aerobics, step aerobics actually, to music. And it wasn't macho enough in Wales for him. But yes, unfortunately, the government was starting to cut back on funding for courses such as personal development, even for special needs, to the point where they could no longer do creative movement to music that set their souls alight. They could only learn how to go shopping, how to iron a shirt, basic lifestyle skills. So I was losing quite a lot of my additional hours. And I found that, well, it wasn't easy to make ends meet at that point. So I started to look around to see what else I could do. And of course, in Wales, again, it still hadn't moved forward enough where women, unless you were a PT instructor, could get work. And it was very male-orientated world still at that time. So I had the opportunity to go and stay with a friend in Berkshire, Reading. And I decided to use the time to investigate what was going on there. And I walked into 3 health clubs on that one day, and I was offered 3 jobs in that one day. I was astounded. It was as if I was, all of a sudden, I was appreciated. I was recognized, I was acknowledged, which hadn't been the case as much in mainstream health and fitness in Wales. But one job that really fascinated me was that they thought I was the right personality for a brand new role. It was new to everyone. It was to set up a pilot scheme for GP referral. And the idea was to look at the correlation between increases in physical activity and decreases in coronary heart disease. Now, in those days, the medical profession and the fitness profession were miles apart. So in order to give the medical profession more confidence in what we were able to offer them and their patients, they sent me on a specific course in London. It was run by Fitness for Industry, and it was called Advanced Instruction for GP Referral. And it was a very in-depth course on the medical side, especially looking at the effects of different drugs on how people exercised. If they were diabetic, for example, where they would inject themselves with insulin if they were exercising, and how I would deal with the side effects of various conditions. It turned out I was going to be receiving patients who'd had open heart surgery, a lot of people who'd had lifestyle skills. The whole point of the GP schemes was to free up the overworked surgeries and GPs from drug-dependent, prescription-dependent patients who really had no more than a lifestyle problem or even a weight problem. So it was a re-education program for the general public on how to live a healthier life, how to involve their families in it, get the whole family hooked on exercise. It was also great for the leisure centres because it increased membership. More and more people would eventually join. And obviously for doctors and overworked surgeries, it would free up the surgeries from people who were just there to get another prescription for tranquilizers or sleeping pills. But I was also receiving people who had open heart surgery. So they had no idea what to offer. And I literally designed the thing myself based on the course that I'd been on and my past experience. I called it the Health Management Scheme. And I did all the graphic design for it as well, the t-shirts, the posters, and it was known as HEART, Healthy Eating and Activity Related Therapy, or Health in the Heart of Wokingham District Council. So I even had the Conservative County Council of the area to come into the health club and exercise on the treadmill while I took his blood pressure. And the photographs went in the Reading newspapers. I was on the radio a lot. I became the Reading radio station's online fitness consultant. And there was Roger, this is someone who's not very good at pronouncing their R's, Roger, the roving reporter from Reading radio station. I was working with him. And he would ring me up at the drop of a hat and say, Viv, we're doing a feature today on these new jeans that are supposed to lift men's bottoms like a bra and make them all pert and perky. We're going to interview some builders on a building site about these new jeans. Can you turn up, please? And I would turn up in my head to toe purple lycra, would you believe, and pounce on these poor workmen on a building site. And they say, hey guys, what do you think of these new jeans? And Viv, what do you think about these new jeans? And I would say, well, Roger, it's all very well wearing jeans that hold your bottom pert and perky, but what happens when you pull your lady friend and your jeans hit the deck and everything heads south and starts bouncing around on the back of your knees? And Roger would say, oh my goodness me, Vivienne, that sounds dreadful. So what do we do to firm up our bottoms? And I would literally have them doing lunges and squats and running up and down ladders and all things. This was live radio.
Vivienne, oh my gosh, you're entertaining. I love it.
Yeah.
The whole scheme, which we all know about, because unless we've sort of not been paying attention. I remember seeing this come in, this scheme. I remember this quite vividly, and it's one of those things that I thought I knew what the GP referral scheme was about. And I actually remember talking to my GP, who had been a long-standing GP. He's only recently retired. I've known him since a child, and Stephen Jones, Dr. Stephen Jones, and we were talking about the fact that this was a brilliant idea because so many people are obese and so many people were not looking after and taking care of their own health, if you like, their well-being, their mental well-being, as well as their physical well-being. And so this is incredible. I mean, then of course this interest was bound to happen with you being on the radio and being interviewed and being, you know, in press, because of course it's such a revolutionary thing. I mean, it's quite remarkable. I was quite taken with that because I recall many of these things, but when I was actually thinking about that, I was thinking how pivotal that is for people to understand that these concepts, you know, not just about putting a facial on something, but actually getting behind their health, which I really, really like. And now, you know, there's so much here. It's incredible. I mean, I'm thinking about how your creative skills match your, if you like, your health, wellness, fitness, and your understanding, which is very extensive. And then we get into the side of it where you actually then we get to move to Tenerife, which is the next part. So interesting and a really, really great story. So you're in Tenerife, you move to Tenerife, that's the next chapter. And then a whole bunch of wonderful things happen from there as well, because that's quite incredible. I mean, most people want to live in the Canaries. I mean, it's one of those, like, you know, let's do that thing. But tell us a little bit about that and what happened and what you actually ended up doing there too, because this is all part of this wonderful story.
Well, I mean, the GP scheme was hugely successful, and on the basis of the results, people were losing weight. People were recovering from their open heart surgery. Their whole lifestyle was changing. They were sleeping better. Their depression was lifting. Beta blockers were causing depression, so people were coming off their beta blockers. So as a result of that, the GP schemes then were expanded nationally all over the United Kingdom on the basis of that data. So that side of the job was done. But it was quite a few years on from there after moving back to Wales. And I'd done a lot of marketing as part of that particular job. I was marketing, I was really loving that side of the job as well, the promotion side. And that started to take over. And when I moved back to Wales, I was taken on as a sales and marketing manager, doing all the marketing for a company. And it was during that time in Wales, I saw a job advertised in Tenerife, which was marketing and sales. And it said, have fun and work in the sun. And it was a particularly awful winter. And I was so fed up of feeling cold. It was drab and wet and cold. And I went along for the interview and I actually got the position. And it took me out to Tenerife. But soon I was sales and marketing manager for a telecommunications company run by a British businessman there. And I was enjoying that. And then an opportunity came along to buy a health club. There was two couples who owned this particular health club on the west coast of Tenerife, and they were as different as chalk and cheese, and they just didn't get on. So I was able to negotiate a deal with them to take over the health club and pay them a hefty deposit, but to buy them out eventually out of the profits from the business. So all of a sudden I found myself owning Athenia, which was a beautiful health club in a 4-star hotel on the west coast of Tenerife. And I thought it was my destiny because my great-great-grandfather was Greek and he'd come from Athens. So Athenia with a Greek-themed health club, it all seemed to make sense. And I also had a few sort of deja vus about why I'd gone to Tenerife, which came out in artwork I'd created before I even went there. And I was looking at this artwork while I was sitting, staring out at the cliffs of Los Gigantes, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And I suddenly realized I preempted my journey to Tenerife before I even knew I would ever go there. Every single facet that I was looking at, that beautiful sun setting over the cliffs of Los Gigantes with a little boat sailing across the harbour, was all in the collage I'd created years before. It was quite a spooky moment. So I felt
I'm going to stop and just highlight that point. Actually, I think that we are drawn to things that are connected with us. I certainly think that we almost visualize, I'm going to use that term because it's overused today, but visualize the concepts of being somewhere, then to actually realize it after having sort of, if you like, emotionally invested in that concept through the art, that you're saying you had the visuals of this, and then ending up there is incredible. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that. It's an incredible thing we've done, and we've sat there having that feeling, which I just want to embellish a little bit for people, because I know a lot of people appreciate that because they think about that.
It wasn't even of Tenerife. Yes, it wasn't even of Tenerife. It was just a collage was supposed to represent yourself and your own interests. But sitting there that evening, I realized that everything in that multimedia collage I'd created, from torn paper and things I pulled out of magazines, everything that I was looking at was in that collage. So I was predestined in a way to be there. That's how I felt anyway.
I love that. I love that takeaway. A lot of people will love that takeaway today, because actually during this time that we've opened our awareness up, and as we've talked about the decades of awareness being opened up, I think people are more aware of these things today than they've ever been. Unfortunately, they might be aware and not apply them. But we'll get there. The application is essential. But I really love this story, and I love that little piece that I didn't know about, but I love that piece. Okay, so now we're in Tenerife. We've negotiated. We've got this wonderful place that you see now, your spa and all of this wonderful lifestyle of. And I'm talking lifestyle in terms of how you feel of the aesthetics and the way you feel about being there. But then I know you started doing some various things here as well. I mean, you were doing martial arts and kickboxing and various other things here. So tell us a little bit about that as well. And then
I was very fortunate there, because when I took the health club over, I didn't have any teachers at all. So I started teaching all the classes myself, or offering what I could offer. I was doing tone and sculpt, aerobics, exercise to music, yoga, stretch and relaxation. And then I took on a young lady called Claire, who was also doing yoga, different Iyengar yoga, which was different to Shivananda, and Pilates. And then I advertised for teachers, and I managed to get Judy, who was a very old school teacher. She was doing tums, bums and thighs and ballet. And also Viviana Sagade and her husband Jason, they were offering Argentinian tango, salsa. And I had Amelia from Argentina, who was actually teaching belly dance. But while I was in the gym one day, I was looking through the reception desk, and I had a little reception lady called Esther, who was very Canarian, very dour lady. And I kept her on because she was a single mum, and, you know, I wanted to help her. And I came across, it looked like a book in one of the drawers. And I said to Esther, "What is this, Esther?" And she said, "Oh, it was some man who came into the gym and he wanted to teach martial arts." And I said, "What, him?" And she said, "Yes, yes." And I looked through this book, and there was pictures of this man with Elvis Presley, with Bruce Lee in Hollywood, with all sorts of Hollywood actors and actresses. And he looked like a Hollywood actor himself. And I thought, no, Esther has made a mistake. This can't possibly be the same person. His name was Juan Castellano. So out of curiosity, I rang the number in the book. And a lady answered the phone, and I said, "I might have the wrong person, but I was told that a gentleman, Juan Castellano, came into," oh, sorry, Raul Guttaraji. I mixed him up with somebody else there. Raul Guttaraji. There was another gentleman who's very important to me. And she said, "Oh, yes, Raul. Raul is on the film set at the moment. He was in Barcelona." She said, "When Raul comes off film set, I will get him to call you." So I was still, who is this person? And sure enough, he rang me and he said, "I come in to see you when I return to Tenerife." Sure enough, it was like Elvis Presley walking in with his entourage, this good-looking martial art instructor who came from Chile originally, had relocated to Spain, had discovered Tenerife while he was shooting a movie there, had been to Hollywood, had been an action film director in Hollywood, but he felt that Tenerife was his spiritual home. And he said, it has done so much for me, Tenerife. He said, I want to give something back to the people. I want to teach them martial arts. And he loved my health club. So he was as good as his word. He set up a martial arts club, and he attracted all the young Canarian men and some young women as well who trained with him. And when he was away filming, he would have his 8th student to run the classes. And he was very, very lovely gentleman, very spiritual man. He would send me poems by Mother Teresa. And he was into yoga and meditation. He would go bare knuckle rock climbing in the cliffs of Los Gigantes, very, very fit. Sadly, he had a scuba diving accident that paralyzed him, but he was able to fight his way back until eventually he was running a stunt college for men and women back in Spain. And he now does seminars all over the world for people, but he still keeps in touch with me. And he said, you are the only one, Vivienne, I would trust to bring him over to the UK to have a seminar here in the UK. So there's a few ambitions yet to be realized, to have a health and wellness seminar and conference, an exhibition where would feature the leading lights that I've experienced in my life.
Vivienne, we're gonna bookmark that, because there's things we can do with that. That is tremendous. What a beautiful story. Oh my gosh. I really like that, and I didn't know that, and I'm not surprised, and I really do appreciate that story. And I love the fact this chap made his way back, and then he's now still teaching. We're going to have to do something with that, you know that, don't you? Have to pull some of these pieces together. Okay, now when you were there, you actually got involved with the as we're wrapping on a couple of points now, because it's a lovely story, but there's a couple of key points. You met with Al Gore with the Ethical Awareness Planet in Tenerife, I understand. That was quite a global warming conference, yes.
While I was running my health club, I was doing a lot of marketing promotions. To promote the health club, I was writing articles on health and fitness in magazines, local magazines, then Island Connections newspapers, which went out all over the Canarian Islands. They ran a whole 12-month series called Fitness with Viv, which covered every aspect of fitness. And I was also writing for a beautiful glossy magazine called Live in Tenerife. And I started writing about my own health club, and then I started writing about other people's. And I was fortunate to meet a lovely gentleman, the man I mentioned earlier. I mixed him up with Raul Gutaraji, Juan Castellano, who was from Asturias in northern Spain. And he was a physiotherapist who used Pilates as a physio tool. So I did some training with him, and I wrote 6 months of articles about him, very in-depth articles. And he always loved my approach. But while I was with Live in Tenerife magazine, I walked into the office one day and the editor was in a right old tizzy. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, the president of Tenerife has asked us to cover the global warming conference in Fuerteventura. I said, wow, amazing. Well done. Congratulations. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, the journalists we usually send to cover these conferences is away traveling and we can't get hold of him. So I went very quiet and I put my arm up, and he looked up and he said, what are you doing? I had my arm up, and I said, well, what about me? He said, you? I said, yes, why don't you send me? And he said, but you write about health and beauty and wellness and all that. I said, yes, but if I can write about that, I'm sure I could write about conferences and interview people. So he said, are you sure? I said, yes. So he said, well, you'll have to be on a plane at the crack of dawn in the morning to fly to Fuerteventura. The hotel is booked, the flight is booked. So I suddenly thought, oh dear, I've accepted that, say yes to everything and then worry about it later as usual. I have 2 dogs. What am I going to do with my 2 dogs, Oscar and Libby? My friends were in the UK. They would normally look after them for me, Marie and Nigel. So what did I do? I went up into the hills looking for a dog kennel, a German dog kennel the night before. I eventually found the kennel. There was nobody there. So I left a note saying, Dos Perro, mañana, okay? And I shot off. One other problem was one of my dogs was pregnant. And by the time I got back to the apartment, she disappeared under my bed. I decided to give birth. So I was up till 2 a.m. delivering puppies. I hardly slept all night. And then at the crack of dawn, I'm messaging Marie, who was due to fly back from the UK that morning. And she replied eventually. She said, yes, Viv, we've just landed. What's the problem? And I said, oh, Marie, hello. I said, you're going to hate me. And she said, why? I said, Marie, I have to fly to Fuerteventura. Libby's just given birth. I need your help to look after the dogs. She said, Viv, I hate you, but I will do it. And she was good as a word. She came to the apartment and stayed with Libby. And I had to take Oscar up into the hills to the dog kennels and then be on the plane. Unfortunately, the plane was going from the north of the island. They forgot to tell me that. And I'd never flown from that airport. So it was touch and go how on earth I got on that plane, but I made it. And what an experience. What an experience.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's incredible.
I was interviewing a NASA astronaut. I was interviewing Richard Ernst, who who'd won a Nobel Prize for designing the MRSI brain scanning machine. I was interviewing so many luminaries and Nobel Prize laureates. I even interviewed all the wives of the Nobel Prize winners. Many of them were scientists in their own right. So it was very, very privileged. I was so privileged to be able to interview them about their work. A few of them were a little bit disgruntled that their husbands were getting all the attention. So it was lovely I was able to interview them. And the great thing was they mentioned all postgraduate science students who come up with business ideas to create feasible developments in developing countries. That year they focused on Africa, the House of Africa, Casa Africa, and they were giving prizes to students to create businesses. And one of them was growing spirulina in patches of water in the Sahara Desert and harvesting them to give the villagers a business so they wouldn't have to leave Africa looking for work and arrive on the coastline of Tenerife to die at the feet of tourists, which was happening then. They were sailing across the ocean to try and get into other countries because there was no work for them in their own land.
I remember working with a company with the product that was from the bark of trees in the Amazonian rainforest, and we were using that as a botanical for hair. And it was the same thing. They were giving the workers of the Amazonian the work that the trees sat. It was quite safe. All they had to go all self-sustaining, so that they wouldn't have to go out of the rainforest to find work because of cutting. Obviously, as we all know, they're cutting down the rainforests. And I remember thinking, what a wonderful project. I was involved in that, so I can totally understand that. And I think things like that, those sorts of projects are incredible. I mean, if we could only sort of, do more with it, hey, but what a wonderful thing to be involved in. I think that's astounding. I mean,
what was so wonderful was I was able to give a NASA astronaut a one-to-one training session. And it was my beam me up Scotty moment, because I managed to get an interview with the astronaut. And another reporter from Barcelona was scurrying around the hotel. And he had a thing that he was in competition with me. And I saw him talking furtively by the bar. And I thought, oh, something's happening. So I went over and he turned to me and he said, the astronaut is in the hotel. He's arrived. So I thought, I'm not going anywhere. I had photographers with me from the magazine. And I said, stay with me. And sure enough, I managed to track down the astronaut. And he'd just come out of the gym. He had a towel on his neck. He was in shorts and a t-shirt. And I thought, oh, he's not going to want an interview now. And I bundled my way forward and I said, hello, I am Vivienne from Living Tenerife magazine. And he said, yes. I said, can I interview you? And he went, what now? I said, yeah. And I just looked, I must have had pleading spaniel eyes or something. And he said, okay. And he sat down and he was wonderful. He told me about his work. Over 17 years, he had the record for the longest time in space, that he'd studied global warming of the climate. He told me how Lake Chad had shrunk the ice cap on Mount Kilimanjaro had shrunk. He told me about the encroachment of the desert over Europe. He had observed all these things from outer space. And as he was talking to me, I noticed when he went to pick his glass up, his arm was bent. He didn't seem to straighten his arm. And I said, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, Michael, but I'm worried about your arm, you know. And he said, oh, he said, it always happens. I've just got back from space. And I said, I said, you've got short habit muscles. And he looked at me and said, what is that? I said, well, it makes sense. You've been in space. He literally had been floating around with his arms and legs slightly bent. I said, you haven't returned your muscles to their pre-exercise length. So he said, I said, doesn't NASA train you in flexibility? Well, no, not really, he said. They work on our bone density and our muscles. We don't do a lot of cardiovascular training. We have to do that ourselves, but no flexibility. So I said, let me show you how to stretch. And we were literally on a balcony by a bar overlooking the sun setting on the beach in Forteventura. I could see the sun going over the island of Lanzarote. And I was giving him a one-to-one training session. And you know, he was so pleased when he went back to California. He sent me an email and he said, it was a pleasure to meet a journalist who was so knowledgeable in the fitness industry. And as a thank you, I'm sending you this. And he sent me photographs he'd taken from outer space of Tenerife and Mount Tidy from outer space. And I was blown away, you know, and he said he'd never been to Tenerife. And I arranged with the president to send him an invitation as a homecoming hero because he was originally from Spain. Michael Lopez. And his family had emigrated to America when he was a little boy, and he'd grown up in Florida to become an astronaut. So, and he said, thank you very much, Vivienne. When I have my schedule allows, I would definitely like to take the opportunity up to visit Tenerife. It looks so beautiful from outer space. So he sent me this jewel of Tenerife.
I think that's my favorite story so far, but we've got so much here. Oh my gosh. Well, we're gonna finish on a potted history of the hair and beauty pageants, because that's the outside. And I know that I came across you myself around, if you like, your beauty pageant history. I remember vividly seeing you around those, and you know, we were talking about that a little bit before. But you know, obviously the beauty side of things, and the fact this actually took you as one into Naples, and you were designing your own pageant with Miss Visionary International, things like this. We're going to touch on that, and then we're going to bring it back to a little bit more about where we're at today, and then finish up our interview. But that I've got to touch on that, because of course it's still incredible how you did the things quite a number of things within that industry sector. Touch on that a little bit for me, please, Vivienne, and then we'll back to the present day.
What brought me back to Wales originally was, first of all, my parents had a really bad accident back in Wales. They both decided to fall down the stairs at the same time. My father's health had been failing for some time. So I was obviously needed at home. It was at a time when I had already sold the health club by then. I was very fortunate to sell my business just as the interest rates were going up and people were literally walking away from their businesses in Tenerife. So I was very fortunate to find two ladies from Ragdale Hall in the UK who wanted to buy it. So I'd moved more into health, into marketing by then. I'd launched Visions PR over in Tenerife. And I'd taken on clients who were in the tourism business. Klaus Agerscoff, he had Tenerife Royal, and also he had the Ritz Resorts, they had a French chateau, they had a Danish manor house hotel, and they had a beautiful golf club in Tenerife. So I had a dream job of designing, coming up with ideas to promote it. I was even talking to Nigel Haver's booking agent to get him to be the face of the chateau, for example. And then I got the phone call that my mum and dad had been found in a pool of blood at the foot of the stairs. So it was a case of everything stopped, and it was a case of having to relocate back to the UK. So I helped my parents all I could. We eventually lost my father. And then I relaunched Visions PR back in the UK. I did a lot of marketing. I took on a few clients, Vitality, Health and Fitness. I was doing events for train station. And it was around about this time that I was approached by a gentleman who wanted to have a business lunch with me. And I thought he wanted me to organize a charity ball for his pageant. It turned out that he'd just taken on the franchise for Miss Universe Wales. Obviously, Miss Universe at the time was run by Donald Trump. So it was a big international pageant on par with Miss World. So he wanted me to partner with him to run Miss Universe Wales. He was more of an IT gentleman. He was quite quiet. He liked the idea of being involved with pageants and beauty, but he didn't want to be bothered with the upfront stuff. He didn't want to be managing the girls, the charity, raising sponsorship. So I literally took the whole thing on. I thought, well, I've never done a pageant before, but I saw it as a big marketing machine that I could use on behalf of my sponsors. And I ran it as if I was running a marketing company and my sponsors were my clients. So everyone who came on board with me and paid so much sponsorship money, they would get a full marketing and public relations service. And I did all sorts of jobs for them with the girls, promoting their business, as well as raising money for the charity. I organized charity balls. I did a Bombay one based on beautiful Bollywood dancers and all the girls dressed up in saris. I had an East meets West fashion show with Saudi Arabian fashion, Western fashion, Eastern fashion. So I would use my imagination. We talked about this, didn't we, Christine, about if you're a creative person, you can bring your creativity to bear on all sorts of genres. So from that, I was able to start helping the girls with all my past experience in wellness, health, beauty, confidence building, assertiveness training, deportment, postural realignment. Those lovely, lovely young ladies looked so much better when they glided down the catwalk. And I had all sorts of fashion sponsors, ball gowns, swimwear. It took me more into the beauty, more into the fashion world. I'd organized fashion shows before, but obviously this was part of the whole pageant as well, the pageantry, the catwalk. I had a lovely photographer from London who worked with me on one of the events I organized, and that was on behalf of the Welsh Warriors. And he came with me into the pageant world. I had a lovely sponsor who he had the biggest franchise for Domino's pizzas in the whole of the United Kingdom, Shaban Al Ibrahim. He'd bid for a prize that I had in a Welsh Warriors charity white collar boxing event, would you believe, that I'd organized at Cardiff City Stadium. And he had such an amazing holiday on the yacht that he bid for, the yacht prize, that he became a sponsor of my pageant that year. When the gentleman decided not to go forward with the pageant himself, I took it on myself then, and I ran it myself the final year. But we were very, very fortunate. We had two gorgeous young ladies from Wales who both won Miss Universe Great Britain and both represented the whole of the United Kingdom at 2 world finals. The first one, Chloe Beth Morgan from Pontypool. She went to Sao Paulo in Brazil to represent the whole of Great Britain in Miss Universe. And then we had Holly Hale, who was a Cardiff University student, that I literally ran the full length of Oxford Street to catch up with her when I saw her walk past one day, all 6'3" of her. I thought,
Holly. Wow, I know Holly.
Yeah, Holly Hale, she has potential. And she was very shy, and I encouraged her to come to the audition. And she came and she won Miss Universe Wales, she won Miss Universe Great Britain, and she went to Las Vegas to represent the whole United Kingdom. So that was an amazing experience for the girls. One of my other girls, I put her in for Miss Great Britain, she won that, and I was able to help her have her dress designed to represent Great Britain in the world final of Miss World. And she looked absolutely stunning. So yes, I had a great pleasure. I organized prize holidays in the Algarve. I had sponsors on the Algarve. I had Castro Marine Golf and Country Club. I had the Algarve Charter Sailing. And they both gave me, one gave me 2 villas with my own pools for the exact week I needed for the prize holiday. The other one gave me 4 days on his chartered yacht. And I was able to take the winners out with the boyfriends, with the photographer, with the film crew. And we had 3 pages in Wales on Sunday when we came back of all the girls photographed on the yacht, at the golf club, on the beach. And we had lots and lots of publicity to do with that holiday. And
yes, I remember all of this because, of course, it's a very strong crossover with myself. So that's really interesting. I know. So it's sort of there we sort of converge on interests. That's really because of me being here and all of that. It's quite interesting. So now, you obviously, we're going to skip over a little bit, but you then took it to the Italian organisers and into Naples. We just talked about that. But there's a lot that happened since, and since then you've gotten to the Abergavenny events where you actually, during the pandemic, you can tell a little bit of that story, and then to present day with your health and wellness and partner in business and the opportunities you've got going forwards. So we're going to lead a little bit from rolling up to the present day, because I've only just found out about this myself with the Abergavenny Art Society, but that was fantastic. So tell me a little bit about that, and then we're sort of then converging into our real time today.
Yeah, well, I was still very much involved in events. I was organising, would you believe, a Venetian ball in Venice and doing promotion for a new costume film called Hedda Gabler, which was great fun. I was doing lots of blogging. I was learning more about social media marketing at that time. And I went out to Venice, and I was the hostess as well, wearing an amazing gown that was a wider cage than the one that Marie Antoinette wore for her wedding. So that had to be sawn in half to get through the airport. And we were stopped by the military police in Venice because they thought we had drugs down the poles at the end of the cage. So there was lots of interesting, fun experiences there. But yes, I organized all that. And then on our return, I was still doing marketing events, but I'd taken on the care of my mother around about this time. She was 97 by then, and she developed Alzheimer's. And social services eventually put her into my full-time care. So I had her for the last 2 years of her life, and it was a very enriching experience. The first year I was able to keep up some of my interests. I'd taken on my return from Venice, I was approached by a European pageant and asked to run their national UK pageant, which I did. I organised the grand final. But towards the end of that year, my mother's health was failing, and it became more of a full-time role for the last year of her life. I'd actually tried to launch my own pageant, Miss Visionary International, and had interest in America, which took me off to Florida, because I had ladies who wanted to run Miss Visionary Washington State. Another lady wanted to run Miss Visionary Texas. I had interest from Russia who wanted to do Miss Visionary Russia. So that was starting to burgeon. But I started to realize I needed to sort of close down a little bit at that point and focus on my mother. And it was a wonderful experience to be there with her and help her pass over at that final moment, and to have my partner Robert and I holding her hand. So that really was quite a traumatizing last year, and it did put everything on hold. So after I organized a funeral, and that was 2 months. We managed to get a holiday, and around about that time, I thought, well, I need to get back into something now. I need to try and get myself back where I was. And the Abergavenny Arts Festival were looking for people to get involved with them. And I ended up becoming a committee member with them, and I was organising their big launch event. It was called the Extravaganza, and I had 4 waves of fashion. I had singers, dancers, I had the Love Zimbabwe drummers. Everything was coming together, and then, of course, the great COVID hit. And my event that should have been last April the 16th was postponed. The Arts Festival was cancelled that year, and the rest is history, really. I mean, we've all been one lockdown after another. So that, I think, did affect my health. I think my mental well-being in many ways was affected, although I was unaware of it at the time. I think everybody felt the same way, especially me, because I'd been tearing around, seeing people, lovely, lovely people, taking photographs, doing marketing, writing blogs, organizing the event. All of a sudden, my wings were clipped and I fell from a great height. From everything, there was just nothing. And I was at home. We had taken on a gorgeous Cocker Spaniel puppy. I'd wanted a dog when my mother was with us, but we waited until, the time was right, because it wouldn't have been fair to have had a lively puppy in the house when my mother was starting to fall. So Maxie was a great help during lockdown. Having to walk him every day was fantastic. It was getting me out there. And a year later, we acquired our little Molly May, another golden show Cocker Spaniel, who's absolutely adorable. And they both become the love of our lives. But as far as work was concerned, like everyone else has discovered, it's been very much online. I persuaded the Arts Festival to go virtual, and I started putting out posts and events online. For St. David's Day, I had one of my contributors who was going to sing at my Abergavenny Arts Festival extravaganza, Lavinia Georgeville, and she sang Calon Long.
You have to rewind a little bit. You lost your bandwidth. It's obviously you froze at the point that you your lovely Cocker Spaniels, and then you didn't get the next bit. So go from that point. You just froze, and there was nothing there. That happens with Zoom. That's why we edit it. Yes.
Did I mention Molly May?
You did mention Molly May, which are beautiful spaniels, and I've seen them, and they're absolutely adorable. They are beautiful. So yes, if we go there.
They are quite a commitment as well, as anyone knows, when they take on dogs, it does change your life and for the better, but also it's a huge commitment.
Very much.
So, yeah, I mean, it's great to get us out into the countryside and to appreciate nature and all that everything has to offer in this beautiful area where we're fortunate enough to live. My heart has gone out to people who have been trapped in high-rise blocks of flats, for example, during lockdown, who haven't had access to green spaces. So it does make you change your priorities somewhat and start to realize how important the home is, how important the planet is. Although I've always had a feeling, ever since I read a book called Only One Earth when I was a student, about how all the planet would be able to be fed if we were all vegetarian, rather than turning over acres and acres of land to fatten the beef. If we were all vegetarian, there would be enough food for everyone. So we have got a small, precious planet, and I think we've all become more aware now than ever of global warming, climate change, pollution. Everything has to be green, ethical, moving forward. So the world is a different place now to the one we went into during the first lockdown. Health is more important, and wellness and mental health. So I found that I've started to reach out to find ethical products that would not only help my health, but that I could offer to other people as well. I've always been interested in nutrition, so it made sense to do something that felt right for me, And I have looked at spirulina in the past, and I found this wonderful company now that is producing the best quality spirulina, uncontaminated, grown in vertical farming, in the best conditions to produce the most powerful strain of spirulina. So that interested me hugely, and all the related health benefits that can bring. So yes, I think nutrition, I think mental wellness, I think meditation, yoga, positive thinking. These are all the things we have to think about now as we move forward. Health, wellness, well-being.
Very much. Now, I think you're very well placed to take this forward. I know that you're passionate about the planet, and as you said, the content is to food, and there's a sustainable way of doing that. As you said, using that simple example of your book, and we've all read that, obviously. I feel that there's so much here, that you've got so much value to offer to your clientele with your health and wellness business. that there's, there's so many little pointers even in your stories that they can take as one wonderful value, tips and techniques and ideas, even just listening to this today, let alone any contact they may have with you. Now, you're quite easily accessible, and we'll be putting on this video where to reach you if should they have interest in any of the above, in the mental state, or I'll call it the mind, body and spirit, including your new health and wellness opportunity, which your business partnering with, which is around a superfood and a very specialized spirulina. And I think that, we've had such a wonderful conversation today, and I've learned so much about you. I knew some of these things, but I didn't know the whole story. So I've actually had a really lovely evening with yourself. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I'm looking forward to actually, popping this out here and for people to listen to and get an extended feel for yourself, Vivienne, because you're such a lovely soul and you have so much to offer people. And and you do look beautiful, and I mean that, and I'm going to use the word beautiful. You look fresh, beautiful, and you are a very good advocate of what you're actually endorsing and have endorsed today within your whole life story. And I think, quite frankly, what more can a person say than to say those sorts of things, having listened thoroughly from one end to the other? I think you offer so much. I'm looking forward to working with you. I've had an absolute pleasure of an evening listening to this. And on that note, I'm going to say a good evening and thank you for such a wonderful story, really, and from beginning to end.
I've had many incarnations, as they say, but it's brought me full circle. And I think health, wellness, longevity, and the creative arts as well, I think they underpin everything. So that's what brought me back to this.
I love it. I'm looking forward to working with you. On that note.